Last week, I was a guest speaker in a BYU Life Sciences class that has spawned several solid startup companies in the past few years. In the following remarks, I revealed how many student startups BYU Tech Transfer has launched so far in 2024. I discussed the $1.9 trillion economic impact of tech transfer. I explained where student entrepreneurs can go to get grants to fund their enterprises. And I outlined the common terms of a deal with BYU Tech Transfer.
I am Dave Brown, the Director of Tech Transfer at BYU, and Adam Stevens is your lead for Life Sciences Technologies. Adam was also a patent attorney at Curtin McConkie for 18 years before he came and joined us a year ago. So good resource for all kinds of things. So Tech Transfer exists as a resource to find ideas for businesses. And often most of our deals will be with outside companies, but sometimes we do deals with students too. We've done probably 6 startups this year that are student startups. Okay, this is just a little fact sheet that I threw up on LinkedIn the other day. You can find it on there. I think you can see it okay here. But it's kind of defining what tech transfer is. Every major university has a tech transfer office. I'll spare you the in-depth history, but in 1982, federal laws were passed to make it so that universities can own technologies created with federal funding. And once that happened, every major university set up a tech transfer office for certain types of federal grants. Like if you're in a lab doing research and you have federal grants, the grant might say that you're required to try to commercialize the technology also. So the government doesn't want to fund technologies that just stay on the shelf. They want them out in the world. BYU also wants to get technologies out where they help people. So the tech transfer office is the office that gets these technologies from academic publications into the marketplace. There's some other facts on there. Some big winners you will have heard of. Obviously, Google came out of Stanford, Gatorade from Florida, and CRISPR, I don't remember which university, but many other large companies as well that you've used and interacted with. Just to put it in scale, in a typical year, there are 24,000 inventions at universities and 10,000 commercialization agreements. So that's a huge impact on the economy. All right, speaking of economic impact, so tech transfer is important for a couple reasons. One is productivity. So $1.9 trillion of output from the U.S. Resulting from technologies. That's great. For me, the main thing for tech transfer always is job creation. We like starting startup companies. We could license to traditional companies, and we do, but we like launching startup companies. That's where almost all job creation comes from in the United States. So 6.5 million jobs during this range of years from tech transfer. And I mentioned the BYU mission to greatly enlarge BYU's influence in a world we wish to improve. Tech transfer makes it so that solutions that are developed in the lab actually affect people in the real world. And we have so many examples of that. I'll give you some in a minute. But for you personally, if you're in the ideation phase, you're trying to decide what to do for a startup company, Tech Transfer is one more resource where you can go and flip through our technologies and see if there's something that's interesting to you. We've tried to make, maybe I'll show you here, we have product sheets on our website now. If you go to techtransfer.byu.edu and look at technologies, we have like pretty attractive sheets summarizing different technologies so you can very quickly take a look at something and figure out what it is. I would listen to Peter Thiel. Do you know who Peter Thiel is? He's one of the PayPal founders, first major investor in Facebook, founded Palantir. He's done a lot of things. And you've probably seen him around at some point. Anyway, I saw a quote from him the other day, and he was talking about different types of entrepreneurs. So many of our entrepreneurs who license from our office, student entrepreneurs, will come from the business school, right? They're maybe taking an entrepreneurship class or doing something like that. But Peter Thiel was saying, starting with entrepreneurship is kind of strange. What you should do, in his opinion, is start with something you feel passionate about, find the solution, and then decide to be an entrepreneur only because that's what it takes to get your solution out into the world. And so that's maybe more where you guys are. If you have something, like I'll show you a couple entrepreneurs here in a second. Okay, well, we'll get to them. But if you have something you're passionate about, find a solution. We might have one and you can get it out there. These I threw up on the screen just because Dr. Jenkins, just about all of these came out of your class, right? I mean, these are all life sciences, recent in the past couple of years. Yeah. These are all going concern startup companies, and many of them, maybe all 4 of them, venture backed from the beginning, which is a good place to be. That means someone with a lot of money is funding it from day one, and they're solving real medical problems for people. So you can be one of these. You know, from this class, I assume you're looking at starting a startup company. Okay, so how to access available technologies. There are a couple things you could do. I assume, who all works in a lab? Do you work in a lab somewhere? Most of you? Probably a lot of you? Okay, so you could be like, that's Jonathan Gall over there. So he works in a lab on campus, and his thing that he's interested in is producing algae, you know, for food as a food product. And so he innovated to create a better way to grow algae. So he developed this technology as an employee of BYU. It was owned by the university. So he disclosed it to us. We patented it and then licensed it to him. And he's launched this company. So if you work in a lab, it's just like, imagine you worked in a company. Maybe you don't plan to ever work for a big company because you're going to launch a startup company. But when that company gets acquired, you'll suddenly be working for Merck or someone big, who acquired it. And when you're working for a major company, if you invent something, the company owns it. And sometimes if they commercialize it, so if you're working for Merck, Pfizer, whoever, and you invent the cure for cancer, you've got this thing solved, the company really invented it. They own it, and they're going to probably try to commercialize it. Sometimes they'll have an incentive for you, like they'll pay you a cash reward or something like that. But universities work the same way. So if you're an employee of a university and you invent something, it belongs to the university. We do deals, though, with student startups that make it very easy to license a technology, even if it's owned by the university. So I know someone will probably get asked all the time, like, what are typical terms when you license a technology to someone? And every deal can be different. But our most common deal is we like to assign technologies outright. So we like it to be, when possible, actually owned by the company. There's some good reasons for that. We can talk about it if you want. And in return, what our office asks for is typically an equity position, 10% typically, that is dilutable, and then a royalty, which would most commonly be 5%. And so the rule of thumb, what we're aiming for there, if you're looking, is we think that the innovation itself is worth 10% or less of the company, and the rest of it's execution. So without paying us any cash up front, you can get a technology into your startup, and then if you win, we win too, to a lesser degree, but we like it. So that's you can do that even with your own technology. But if you don't have a technology, maybe you're not working in the lab, or you're not working on what you care about in the lab, you can go and look at our website. So this is Brian Bentley. He was an outside businessman. He had worked at a bunch of different companies, and he and a partner were looking for a way to address MRSA infections. And so he looked at tech transfer. He came by the office, talked to us, and they found a technology that's really great. It makes it so that you can diagnose MRSA or detect it much faster. If you detect it faster, you save more people's lives faster. So so he went ahead and identified the technology he wanted, licensed it, and then he's launched his company. And so they're off doing all the things companies do, getting early sales, raising money, doing all those business things. So this is the website, techtransfer.bou.edu. Are some of you on it? You could be on it if you have a computer now. What we try to do, there are different sections, so you can navigate down to whatever interests you. It could be food and agriculture, life sciences, medical, whatever it is. And then each of these are a summary sheet. So if you're interested in that e-reader display, because that's not life sciences, but if you are, you click on it, pull it up, and it has an image that tries to convey kind of what the technology is. And then it has a few business points on it. So that's just going to tell you kind of what the business opportunity is. And this is definitely created to appeal to outside business people. Most of our deals are with people from outside of BYU. And if you see something that seems like a fit, like it's solving a problem you care about, then reach out to us. Probably you would reach out to Adam, but you can contact anyone in our office. We'll all talk to you. And then, kind of explore the technology. We'll connect you with a professor if we need to, give you some academic papers, patents, whatever else, so you can kind of look further into it. You could also do that at a different university. Like if you look through all of our inventory, we have around 700 technologies on the site. But if you're 0 for 700, none of those seems interesting. University of Utah's up the road. A little further is Utah State. UVU has some tech transfer. So there are other places you could go to be universities also. So, okay, evaluating technologies. So you find a technology, you look at the term sheet on there or the summary sheet, and it looks interesting. What should you think about next? So these are your main criteria you would want to think about. First of all, market potential. You want to determine whether there's an opportunity in the market. So traditionally what you would do is you would think about market size. You would say, let's see, say you're addressing heart disease. You would say, how many people a year in the US have heart disease? I don't know, that's going to be a lot, right? What is it, 50 million people? A lot of people. And so you would say, oh, well, that's a pretty big market. If I can address that, that's going to be a good market. Traditional entrepreneurs, like professional entrepreneurs who come looking at technologies, typically want a market size of $500 million or more annually. And but that's big. Not everyone has to do that. There are other funds and different types of entrepreneurs who look for smaller opportunities. You could do something very niche and still do well with it. One way to look at market potential is to talk to possible end users. If you want to do that, and for any of you starting up companies, I don't know how integrated you are with the Rollins Center, but you should talk to Taylor Halverson, who's an entrepreneurship professor, about getting a validation grant. They give you initially, it's a few $100s. It's like $500 or $600, but you just use that to kind of test the market, like send out some surveys or talk to people or whatever. And those seem to be pretty easy to get. So I would march over as soon as you have something and ask Taylor for that kind of grant. If you think there's an opportunity for federal grants, I don't think I put a slide in for this, but SBIR grants are designed for small businesses to interact with universities and get federal funding. Usually, if you get a grant like that, it's usually about $250,000. And so that'll really get your business running. And there's an organization, the Utah Innovation Center, which is set up by the state of Utah. Their goal is to make it so more of the federal funds end up in Utah. And so they will help you apply for an SBIR grant. They'll give you $3,000 just for trying, just for going through the process of applying for a grant. And so that works out to you're getting paid like $60 an hour or something to apply for the grant probably. And so go through that process, you apply for the grant. If you get it, then you have a business. Lately, we've done a few deals, including with students, where we license a technology, but it's contingent on them applying for that grant funds because that's what's going to make or break the deal for the organization. So those are some options. There are other ways you can get validation grants at the Rollins Center. If you use that validation grant and things are going well, then they have what's called a traction grant, which is a little more. It's $1,500. They'll walk you through this whole process. Any business person will tell you at this point, any entrepreneur, that you need to research the market, see if there's really an opportunity there. And you might just know already if you've worked in a business that is dealing with a certain problem. Okay, intellectual property. If we have time, we'll go through a different slide deck about intellectual property. If we don't, then maybe another day. But you do want to think about the protection for your intellectual property. When companies start, medical device companies, it turns out the odds of a medical device startup company succeeding, are 4x, 4 times as large if they have a university technology. So that means there's like a 60% failure rate instead of a 90% failure rate. And I think the main reason probably is because typically at a university, the intellectual property will have been handled well. There'll be probably a patent for the technology. For the sorts of things that you're interested in, for your inventions, life sciences, we probably have patents. I do our software licensing. So with software, sometimes it's patentable, sometimes not. Sometimes it's hard to get meaningful protection. But for most of our life sciences things, we're really solid. Still, you want to look into it. Say, has a patent issued? Is a patent pending? Where are we at on this? Okay. And a patent is just one barrier to entry. There are other ways you could exclude competitors. You could have like regulatory exclusions or other things. But this is a very easily accessible monopoly you can get in business. Okay, then third, inventor relationship. So if you see a technology on our website and you think, it's a great technology, one of the questions you can ask is, well, who invented it? Who's the professor? And Dr. Jenkins has done a number of startup companies. If it's one of his, the professor is going to be good to work with. Jonathan Hill, he's done a bunch. He knows how these things go. You might have a professor who's new to entrepreneurship and doesn't know much about it, doesn't want to know much about it. So you would gaze, in that situation, you would want them to at least be willing to be a consultant at some level. You need their help a little bit. One great resource to think about is other people like yourself. If you identify a technology that came out of a lab, you might ask yourself, well, is there a student working in that lab who would be part of my startup company? That'd be a good way to go. So, but you want some inventor relationship that will give you kind of the technical expertise that you need. Right? Okay, so what is a typical deal? I already talked about terms a little bit. I didn't realize I had this on here. So I mentioned that most universities don't assign technologies outright to the companies. That's because if technology is federally funded, the federal government doesn't want you to do that. There's some hoops you can jump through to make it happen. But because we take less federal funding at BYU, our technologies mostly can be sold outright to a startup company. If you're the startup, why does that matter? Well, it means that if you have actual ownership of the technology, then that's an asset on your balance sheet. When you go to raise money or to borrow money or something else, you actually have a hard asset that has value to it. So that'll help you. If you're being acquired, it's definitely nice to own the IP outright. Let's see. The other main point I wanted to make to you is that as a startup company, you don't have to pay any money up front. If there are patent costs that have accrued, we give startup companies a year to pay that. So think through the process there. So you would license the technology, essentially paying nothing up front. Then you work on this thing for a year, almost a year. And at that point, you're going to know whether you have a business, whether you're going forward with this thing or not. If you don't, then you would terminate the deal and you've never paid anything and maybe you learn some things along the way. But if you have gained some traction, then you proceed with the business and then that's great. You're doing that because it's profitable. So, all right. How does intellectual property work? Let's just hold off on this and I'll probably pull up our other presentation. Give you an IP primer maybe. You guys have any questions about tech transfer that I should answer? How will it work? Let's just go through the timeline. So you license the technology, you get a year into it and you're like, this is going. We're going to keep going with this. So at the year point, we would ask you to reimburse whatever patent costs there were. At that point, you should not have a problem doing that. Like if you've got a going concern, you'll have raised money or done something to fund the business. Maybe you have a grant. Well, some grants can be used for patent costs and some can't. But anyway, and so then you keep going. Eventually, a few years down the road, you're going to have a product that you're actually selling and making money. And when you do, you'll pay the equivalent of a royalty to BYU. So say it's 5%. So if you're selling your product for $100 a test or whatever it is, then $5 is going to BYU. So we would have that stream. Many companies exit before they're paying much in royalties. So the equity turns out to be the most important thing for us typically. So if BYU owns 10% of a company, if it's a medical company or life sciences company, you typically will have raised money. So we'll probably be diluted. By the time you exit, we probably won't own 10%. We'll probably own 5% or 4% or something like that. But say you get acquired for $10 million, then that would be like $400,000 to BYU. It's great. So, and, we've had, so far this year, we've had, 2 good exits from our companies. One that I think has happened, but it's a smaller exit. And then we have 2 more that seem likely. So that's a lot of companies making it. You can definitely be one of those. Still willing to take other questions about tech transfer if you like, though. Yeah.
So you were saying that it's better to have the patent be owned by the company.
The pro is that the company actually owns the asset, like literally owns it. It'd be like when you buy a car, you might still owe some money on it, but you own the thing. And so that should be beneficial if you're raising funds from venture capitalists. They're going to want to say, you've watched Shark Tank, right? They're going to ask you, what's the IP position? And you'll say, we own a patent. And that's like way better than we're leasing rights or something, right? And so that's good. The downside is once it's your intellectual property, you have to be in charge of patent prosecution and everything. Like you have to make those decisions, and some of them cost money. So if you decide to do some more patenting, that's going to cost you some money. So you have to think about whether to do that. We feel, though, that you want to get patent decisions down with the company, down where the product is. Because when we get a brand new technology and we don't have a licensee, we're kind of guessing what the future product will be when we're patenting. Like we don't know. It's all hypothetical. But once you have a going concern that's creating an actual product, you know exactly what you need to protect, and then you can really protect that. So we think that's better. So good question.
Is there a better method for like understanding each of the processes, like how the actual diagnostic test that's been published works?
We're trying to communicate the information better. For a small number of our technologies, we actually have like 30-minute videos on YouTube that are explaining the technology, but that's just a drop in the bucket. That's just a few of them. For most of them, the tiers of information really are, you have that summary sheet on the website. That'll give you high-level business points. And then you'll have probably either a patent application or an issued patent. So that'll tell you what's protected, and we'll kind of describe the technology. Then you'll have, like you say, a journal publication. But as far as researching on your own, that's usually all we have. Depending on the technology, there could be some like popular media sorts of publications as well. But those are the basic things. And then beyond that point, to get more technical, it is talking with the professor and other inventors for sure. Yeah, but we're working, if you have any ideas, you got to let us know because we're working on getting information out there better. Yeah.
Does it violate your NDA to go and ask the professor about?
Okay. And so you're talking about, when we're talking about a non-disclosure agreement, we have a folder of actual disclosures that will, and maybe you've signed an NDA for it, I don't know. That if you sign an NDA, we'll give you access to that on Dropbox. So then you can see the actual invention disclosures, which we wouldn't publish otherwise. And so it could include material there that wasn't included in the patent application. It was a little different. But we just want, our view is we just don't want you to publish things that are secret in there. If you're talking to the professor, it's never going to be a problem because they already know that information. We just don't want it on your blog or whatever.
I actually think you guys do a really good job at summarizing what's being produced.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always nuances that you're just not, even if you feel like you understand, I can almost guarantee you won't fully, nor fully capture what the market opportunity is or anything like that. Like it's always good to bring along. At this stage, if you're struggling to find an idea, I think going here first and literally just citing the NDA and saying, I'm interested in this idea, the next few weeks, months are just vetting that and see what the market opportunity would be for you, how you think you could address it. And that's literally what we're doing in class anyway. So I wouldn't stress about being able to like get a meeting in place by, tomorrow after dinner or something if that were there.
Yeah, and a lot of people, a pure business person with no technical background would just try to get their arms around those key business points. Okay, what does the solution purport to do? What is the problem? And then start doing, like you say, running validation and then getting more into the technical weeds. But